Week 14 is an intriguing one for NFL DFS because we've got some lower salary plays in non-terrible games or some mid-range guys I don't hate in games that I don't mind. And honestly, it grades out pretty well. We can actually do some fun things, whether it be a quarterback, tight end, maybe a high-salaried receiver or a running back. And I kind of like the way this slate sets up. We're going to break down that slate, talk about some key game stacks this week, talk down who those mid-range and lower salary players are we like, and we want to outline where we're allocating that salary when filling out Week 14 FanDuel DFS lineups. This is the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Thursday by Brandon Gdula. Check him out on Twitter at Gdula13. You can find his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior managing editor. Brandon, Week 14 is coming in hot. How you doing today?
Yeah, let me be the first to say I can't believe it's already Week 14. It does feel like it's flying by, but then I think back when we had, the first name that came to mind with injuries was Nick Chubb, but that feels like a long time ago too. Yeah. So, but things are flying by. This week's really, really interesting from a lot of different the angles, but I'll answer the question. I'm doing great, Jim. How are you?
Thank you, Brandon. I'm doing great as well. I appreciate that. You found your way there. Proud of you. Yeah. A little bit of meandering, but it's okay. You touched some key points along the way. You mentioned the Nick Chubb injury feeling like it was forever ago. I feel like Seahawks Cowboys, which was 1 week ago, was a decade ago. So I get it. We're all in the same boat. But honestly, you get this re-jolt of energy I feel like, to me, I'm not sure if you've had the same experience, but the past month has been very good to me for DFS. And I think a lot of it is because we've been able to get back to basics with Heat Check favorites of just stacking up good games and letting the cards fall where they may. And I think that is something we can do again this week, specifically with Bills Chiefs, but also I think to an extent Rams Ravens, despite the fact that total is low. And then also to an extent 49ers versus Seahawks. We're going to break down those games from a bookmaking perspective, letting you know what we're seeing in those games, outline other spots where you see some value for this week, and get you ready for Week 14 and DFS. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. Tom Vecchio is with you every weekday breaking down NBA DFS on the Daily ISO. That show also goes up on the FanDuel TV Plus app. You can also find us there with the Heat Check every Monday and Thursday. The Heat Check show is also streamed live over on the FanDuel YouTube page. So shout out to YouTube. You leave us a thumbs up. If you like what you see over there, if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And then if you want to watch us on FanDuel TV Plus, go to FanDuel.com/watch and log in with your FanDuel account. You can watch Up and Adams, Run It Back. You can watch Covering the Spread, Heat Check, whatever it may be, Daily ISO, all in the FanDuel TV Plus app, also available on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Roku devices. Also, a free play is up once again for Week 14. If you want to enter the free play for Week 14, go to FanDuel.com/research, the FanDuel Research free play. There is a post on the main page of FanDuel Research where you can find a link to the free play for Week 14, FanDuel.com/research to find the link for that. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame moneyline wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877 770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's dig in now to our slate overview for week number 14. Brandon, when you look at the week 14 main slate, what stands out to you as being the key to filling out a good lineup for this week?
Basically figuring out which non-obvious games I want to prioritize. There are a very small handful of games that just jump out, or at least offenses in some cases that jump out. But after that, it feels really flat, and you can make a case for a lot of different games, a lot of different teams, a lot of different one-offs. Which, if anyone's listened to the show the whole season, they know I don't love the one-offs, even in just sort of my main highest, well, I almost said highest floor, but safest sort of lineup, because the floor does not exist and you got to ignore the floor. But I think trying to parse through, there's the graphic, just trying to parse through the other games and figure out where I feel good. So this show is going to be very helpful in that regard, because it's really easy to kind of take a look at the slate, see who stands out relative to salary, like from a primary standpoint. And then you got to take that next step and figure out, like, okay, I can't just play, can't play all the Chiefs and Bills, right? Like, where do I go from there? So I
Agree
think
to
figuring
disagree on
out,
that part, but that's fine. Go ahead.
can you fill out one lineup with nobody else?
Legally,
Or just
no,
everyone's,
but I would if I could.
that's what I'm saying. So we
Right.
got to go somewhere else, and figuring out which of those games stands out, I think is going to be very helpful as we talk through this slate.
Yeah. So for me, it's like building around the key games I like. And I'm okay going with the obvious ones because honestly, like they're standouts for a reason. Like that Bills Chiefs game. Like I'll build around that game and kind of go from there. But I think the key thing for me on the main slate is how good the mid range is at running back, and then how good the like 6,500 and lower ranges at receiver, which we haven't really seen a lot this year. I've had a hard time finding value receivers I did not despise most of this year. And for some reason this week, there are 4 guys I feel legitimately good about using. Those guys being Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, Odell Beckham, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Maybe there are more, but like having 4 is 4 more than we had literally last week. So it's a weird deviation where I know I can spend up a quarterback, I can spend up a tight end, and I want to do that this week via guys like Kelsey, Kittle, and then all the quarterbacks. So I feel like it's like I was talking about going back to basics with heat check stuff, like stacking games. It's also a massive deviation where I'm spending down at running back and receiver in order to spend up at quarterback and tight end. So back to basics in one sense as far as stacking games, but then massive deviation and using the savings at running back and receiver in order to spend up, at least right now, at quarterback and tight end.
Yeah, I think the whole shift for us at running back over the years, where we're very receptive to running backs in like the 7,000 range, is because those are the featured backs, aside from like the true elite, which is basically just Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
Those are the featured backs, but the production is a little more pass heavy. So like their roles are a little less perfect in the red zone. I would assume there's a little bit of a trend in the red zone in terms of passing. I could be wrong on that, but at the very least, things are getting spread out a little bit more. But in years past, the 7,000 range would be the players with like weak snap rates and stuff. But like these are a lot of the featured backs now. So
Like Zach Moss
we
played 95% of the snaps
yeah,
last week and is
like,
$6,800.
like, are you gonna tell me Rashad White's like not the team's, like the Buccaneers featured back? Like he is
80% snap
so
rate every week,
yeah. So like, is the production as good as the David Johnsons of years past? Obviously not, but it's a whole different landscape now. So I'm with you that mid range at running back and trying to narrow that down too is going to be I have my favorites and everything, but
Yeah.
being receptive to moving away if I need to
Yep.
is going to be, look, this is going to be a sort of, for me, a discussion based kind of show.
Agreed. All right, so let's dive into it. Beginning with the injuries for Week 14, Trevor Lawrence didn't practice Wednesday with a high ankle sprain. CJ Beathard would start if Lawrence can't go, and in very Iowa fashion, Beathard is an Iowa alum. It is a total of 30.5 in this game. Christian Kirk is also going to miss this game after he had core surgery, going to miss 6 to 8 weeks, which is a bummer for him and for us. Total for this game is 30.5 against the Browns. Any interest in the Jags offense, or are things too gross to go there? Let's assume Lawrence does not play. I think there's a chance he does, but let's assume for now he does not.
So I don't really even target good teams against the Browns if I can avoid it. I don't see a lot here. The salaries though for Calvin Ridley and Evan Ingram's is a little high at 57, but I think he's a good player. He's got some athleticism. I feel like he's eternally due for some TD regression, but
Finally
he got there
last week.
Yeah. Still should be more on the way, but I don't think that this is a situation, even if Lawrence plays, he's not going to be near 100%, that I'd want to get there as a primary. Maybe you could talk me into, as we talk about this next injury, like a bit of a mini stack, but I think I'm mostly out on the Jaguars. What about you?
Yeah, I think if Lawrence were to miraculously play, I could talk myself into Parker Washington at $4,100. You're a huge Penn State guy, so you got that going for you. Washington, a Penn State guy, had a very low breakout age, very young breakout age, and popped up last week with Christian Kirk going down and played really well. Not like he was a bad prospect or anything, but he's a rookie. He looked good in that game. So if Lawrence were to play, maybe I get there, but it's not just Lawrence that has caused this total to be low. There's also a lot of wind in this game, which we'll talk about later on, as far as some bad weather for this week. Like you mentioned, the defense is very good. I bet the under on this game before Lawrence got hurt when it was 36.5. So I'm not expecting a lot of scoring here, even if Lawrence does play. So maybe Washington, but likely not even there. As for the other game you mentioned, other half of this game, Mari Cooper didn't practice Wednesday due to a concussion and an injury to his ribs. Joe Flacco remained with the first team offense here. With Cooper leaving early in week 13, Flacco fed Elijah Moore, but it was a lot of prayer yards, a lot of uncatchable deep balls. Shocker from Joe Flacco. And now they're in a game with a total of 30.5. So if Cooper does sit, what is your interest level in Elijah Moore?
It's moderate. He had 251 air yards last week, which, if anyone doesn't know, it's just how many yards downfield the ball traveled whenever you were targeted. As Jim mentioned, not all of those were catchable, anything like that, but you want air yards because downfield targets are just generally worth more FanDuel points on average, because when you catch those, they're very impactful. But his 251 air yards were more than any other player all season. I believe there have been 9 games this year where a player had 200 air yards in a game. So that was by far the sort of best workload from an air yard standpoint. There's still risk based on how many are catchable and everything like that, but it's hard to completely turn down, considering Elijah Moore at 62 this week with that kind of workload. And he and Flacco have a bit of a rapport from their time together with the Jets. So I'm pretty interested. I don't think he would do enough to jump out to me compared to some of the other names you rattled off in this range, but I think he's in play.
I think if it were a better environment, I'd be okay with it. I don't really know if I want to go at a high ADOT guy in a game with massive wind, inefficient quarterback, stuff like that. I think Flacco's an upgrade, but that's not saying a whole lot. And when I have guys like Rashee Rice here, Zay Flowers, and the other guys we alluded to earlier on, I'm okay missing out. Again, I think that what you said is we should be receptive to considering him. That's accurate, and that's very fair. But I'm also okay if it burns me, because my process is not to target receivers in games with heavy wins, with bad quarterback play. So I think that the process is there from a volume perspective, and for I agree with you where air yards are valuable, but I also think that it's a really volatile position, and I'm okay stepping away from volatility if I think he'll be popular, which I would not be shocked if he is popular for this week. Zach Wilson is back, Brandon. That's exciting. He reclaimed the Jets' starting job this week per Robert Saleh. Brees Hall missed practice Wednesday with an ankle injury. They're at home against the Texans, who will have their first game without Tank Dell, after his season-ending injury. RIP to our king, Tank Dell. Dalton Schultz able to get in a limited session with his hamstring injury. So, are you going to check out any Texans now that Zach Wilson is back to give this game more pushback, or is this game still a cross-off to you?
I can relate to Zach Wilson because every week after this show, I say, I'm not coming back. You ask me to come back. I say no, and then I'm back. It's basically
everyone knows you're lying because I would never ask you to come back. Like, at least lie better.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, let's see here. Nico Collins salary 78.
I'm not touching outside receivers against the Jets. I love Noah Brown. I love Nico. I hope they tank this week so I can use them next week at lower salaries.
Don't say tank. It's too soon.
What?
Don't say tank. It's too soon.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. That's rough.
Yeah, I don't really see who I would go to here.
You've been more on the Jets guys than I have. You've had interest in Brees Hall. His salary is down to $6,400. I think he's a better play with Wilson starting than with the other guys. Shout out touchdown Trevor. And like Wilson's more in play too, but like, I don't know. Wind speed in New York is 10 miles per hour. There's some rain in the forecast there. Usually I don't care about rain. If I can use it as an excuse not to touch this game, I might.
So Brees has at least a 60% snap rate. Hasn't hit 70 though. But 7 straight games. What's his salary?
64. He has a 44% red zone share as well. But like they don't get there.
Yeah.
It's 4 out of 9 chances for the entire year.
I think he's similar to Elijah Moore, where I see the case for it. I'd consider him, but probably doesn't do enough with the tier. I'm still learning how to click out of the filter for the games. So everything's taking me a little bit longer, which is why I've stalled a couple of times already. Yeah, with Bijan, I know 700 is a lot, but like we got Bijan.
Well, even like in that range, like Javonte Williams is a better play than Brees, right? Given the game environment for Javonte playing indoors, like Javonte is also pretty inefficient, but like Hall has been too. So if I'm going to use an inefficient back, I'd rather go at the guy playing indoors against I think, worse defense than Javonte Williams.
Yeah, I think my larger point was just going to be we've got a lot of running backs in the consideration set. I don't know if I need to add more to it.
Right.
Would I talk anyone out of playing Brees Hall? Probably not.
Sure.
But I don't think I'd get there.
I agree with you there. The Vikings have activated Justin Jefferson off of IR, clearing a path for him to return in week 14. Gotten a full practice on Wednesday, the rare full by Wednesday as well. You'll talk about Jefferson in the trend section. Isaiah Pacheco missed practice Wednesday with a shoulder contusion. Andy Reid said the shoulder's getting checked out, but contusion to me makes it seem a bit less serious. Jerick McKinnon, limited Wednesday. He's missed out each of the previous 2 games. We'll talk about them in the bookmakers section. Other side of that game, the Bills opened the practice window for Dawson Knox, who got on a full practice on Wednesday, another full by Wednesday. So it means he's probably back this week. We'll talk about them in the bookmakers section as well. Both Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet took part in a walkthrough for the Seahawks on Wednesday, but neither took part in the actual practice. Walker has missed the past 2 games with an oblique injury. Charbonnet hurt his knee late in the game against the Cowboys. Other side, Elijah Mitchell didn't practice with a knee injury on Wednesday. We'll talk about them in the bookmakers section. Derek Carr somehow got in a limited practice Wednesday despite suffering concussion week 13. I've had Derek Carr in the injury section of the recap podcast like 5 times this year, and he's played every single game somehow. He said he's not concerned about his rib injury. Taysom Hill missed practice with injuries to his foot and left hand. They're going to monitor him throughout the week. I initially thought Hill would be an awesome play at 7,000 under the assumption that Carr would not play, but now Carr may play and Hill may not. So if this happens, how would it alter your view of the offense against the Panthers for the Saints?
Yeah, and so, I mean, they've lost 3 straight. They're, I think, technically in 3rd place in the NFC South, but very, very much within striking distance. So that might skew things towards trying to push through so long as, everything is good to go.
I just don't get how he can clear concussion protocol in
That
a week, like less than a week again, even though he was just in it over their bye week.
I don't know.
It's nuts.
Yeah. But either way, I don't care really who the quarterback is. I like Chris Olave. His salary 76, indoor game. He has one game all year with under 20% target share. He gets downfield work. I think the bigger question is if there's no Taysom Hill, what do we do with Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Kamara is someone with like a really solid role from a pass catching perspective. Obviously, salary is 9,000. So between Kyron Williams and and Christian McCaffrey, and the big downside with Kamara is that he loses work inside the red zone. But if Taysom Hill can't go, the odds he loses that go down. He could still lose it to Jamal Williams. Kamara's red zone share since Williams came back is 32%, but still at 106 yards from scrimmage per game, which is comparable to Kyron Williams. So, and he's in a better matchup than Kyron as well. Kyron's on the road against the Ravens, whereas Kamara's at home against the Panthers. So I think I'd still prefer Williams just because I like his role a lot more than I like Kamara's, but like you could make a defense and make a pitch for putting Kamara above him at least. I think you could say that for sure.
Where do you have Kamara's adjusted opportunities in his most relevant sample? Because on the full season and just everyone's active games, he leads all running backs. I
He's
don't
at
know if he
28.2 in each guy's most relevant sample, which is third behind Zach Moss at 32. Or sorry, Kenneth Walker the third is Zach Charbonnet sits. But that's probably not going to happen. He's at 32 there. So it's behind McCaffrey only at 28.8 for Kamara. Zach Moss 26.8. I lied there. I was off.
Okay. Either way, though, Kamara, I don't even know how many times I've played him all season.
I used him a lot earlier on this year, but I used him last week too.
It is a long season, as I mentioned, but
yeah.
I mean, this rushing matchup is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
I don't think he's in like an awkward salary range though, because if you're not playing Kamara and Kyron, like there's basically no one between McCaffrey. And if you were, I mean, I'll say like, I don't know how many people are going to consider ETN. Like I can say Josh Jacobs, but what's that?
Not I for ETN.
Yeah. So I don't know. He's like in that awkward range where I don't think he'll fit most people's process unless the optimizers just really like him in the matchup and without Taysom. But
I don't think they will.
I need to bump up Kamara. I'd probably just prefer him to Kyron. And I love Kyron, but given everything here, I should probably prefer Kamara.
That's probably fair. If Taysom doesn't go, you mean, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
To clear out the touchdown equity. Yeah. I think that's probably fair. Maybe I should be higher. Maybe it's indoors too. So maybe.
Yeah.
I think you could be right about that too. The Chargers opened the practice window for Joshua Palmer this week. He was limited on Wednesday. He missed the past 5 games with a knee sprain. Unclear whether he'll be back this week or not. I'll talk about the Chargers against the Broncos defense in the trend section. Finally, Deontay Foreman practiced in full for the Bears on Wednesday. He missed week 12, and Roshan Johnson was the lead back ahead of Khalil Herbert. Personally, I want no part of this backfield until someone separates. What about you?
Yeah, with so many guys, like it's possible one of them burns us. With so many options, that probability goes down, but also the probability that you even pick the right one who they would like lean on goes down. I just don't think, like from a whole lineup standpoint, it makes sense to target one of them.
Yeah, I very much agree with that and will happily miss out if one of them winds up burning me. Let's move now into our bookmaker section for week number 14 and begin things with the premier game on the main slate. That is between the Bills and the Chiefs. Total in this game is the highest in the slate at 48.5. Spread is tightened during the week with the Chiefs now favored by 1.5. I did take the Bills money line when it was plus 118. So clearly I view this as being a very tight game. Wind speeds here pretty moderate at right now 7 miles per hour. it feels like a very traditional game to stack where we've got good players on both sides. I think it's a 2-quarterback game, and we can do it with some value plays. Is this, to you, Brandon, the clear top game to stack of the week?
It is. You said you think it's a 2 QB game, which is sad.
Well,
Because I know what you mean.
I said I think. Sorry, I should emphasize the I. I think, because I know that you're more skeptical of Mahomes, but I think it's a 2-quarterback game.
That's not what I meant. I
Okay.
also think it's a 2 QB game.
Okay,
But
cool.
the fact that we even have to
Sure. That's
put
very
those
fair.
terms around it, because Mahomes just hasn't really been Patrick Mahomes from a pure production standpoint. He's got one game over 30 FanDuel points. I guess really one game over 26 FanDuel points. The touchdowns are like solid, but not phenomenal. The pure yardage output just isn't there. And I think this game, for me, the conversation on this game, not that I would be low on this game if we kind of go away from Mahomes, but it speaks to the offense as a whole. Should we just sort of pencil in Mahomes to have like a classic Mahomes game, or is like 250 and 2 touchdowns kind of to be expected? They just try to go out and win, because this game means a lot to both sides here. It means more to the Bills, but maybe it's a little bit closer to the vest. But what are your thoughts on Mahomes? Because I think that really dictates like how we should feel about this game as a whole.
So he has not been classic Mahomes this year. Like you said, the totals have not been there. You look at his I've got the player card up on FanDuel TV Plus and FanDuel YouTube. Like, he hasn't had a lot of scorcher games, but then that's this column, the fantasy points column. I also want to draw your eyes to this column, the rushing touchdown column, where he's had 0 the entire season, despite the fact he's averaging his most rushing yards per game for his entire career and most rushing attempts per game for his entire career. So he is due for positive regression in terms of rushing touchdowns. And like you said, this game matters a lot. So should we expect Mahomes to continue to be underwhelming? Yes, because the supporting staff is not good. And the Bills defense has played pretty okay, despite the fact that they've lost a lot of key guys. However, is vintage Mahomes still within his range of outcomes? I think absolutely yes for that as well. So that's why I want to be here. Will he be in my head-to-head lineup against you? No. Will he be in my highest dollar single entry lineup? Probably not, because I'm leaning Lamar there. But like, he is in the consideration set for me, and I will have him in my player pool regardless. So that's where I'm at on Mahomes. Allen's the better quarterback in this game, given the Chiefs' injuries on defense. But I think that Mahomes is a guy I am saying right now I will have in my player pool for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know, but maybe it feels, I don't know, because like I don't know what the perception is.
Perception's
Like
bad.
like my brother drafted him in like the 3rd round in our league, and he's like, Mahomes sucks. And
did he ask
like,
you if he can drop him?
Not yet, but
that's the tipping point where you know that a guy's about to like go off, is if someone asks if they can drop him. So tell your brother to ask you that, just to manifest it for me, please.
It's just so weird, because would it surprise me if he went for like 250 and 1 or 2 touchdowns?
No.
And they won? No.
No.
Would it surprise me if he goes for like 450 and 5? Also no.
Correct.
So it's tricky. I have him a little bit more as like a 0.75 QB play, because like you said, not going to go there in like a main lineup. Really like Josh Allen more in this particular game, but you can easily make the case to pivot to Mahomes, but Josh Allen definitely, because the salary is not that huge of a gap.
Yeah. Don't
So
gotta
for
sell
me,
yourself
Josh
on
Allen.
this for Josh Allen. Josh Allen's salary, $9,000. Do you prefer Josh Allen or Lamar if you've got one tournament lineup this week?
I feel like the higher probability of a game that I just adore would be this game, because of what it means, especially to the Bills.
Yeah, they need to
like
win.
They need this, and whenever that happens, we could see Josh Allen with one of those like 7 or 8 carries, 50 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, I want to get to Josh Allen, but I probably think I'll settle with Lamar fairly often as well. But I think those 2 names are the 2 QBs that I'm considering for my primary lineup.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone else is particularly close.
So they're in a tier of their own to you? Because I think I agree.
Yeah, they're in a tier of their own for me.
Mhm.
Although the hardest part, honestly, and this is weird saying this for Lamar, I almost kind of think Lamar's easier to stack,
Oh, yeah, I think he is
which has
too
not
because the salaries
historically
are so
been
low. Yeah.
it just hasn't historically been the case. But I don't even know if you need to stack Josh Allen
Yeah.
necessarily.
So
And
let's
with Knox potentially back, like I
yeah.
think it gets muddied. So let me know your thoughts on the pass catchers here
Let's
for
talk about
Buffalo.
why it's tough to stack because I think we both assume now that Dawson Knox will play here, given he was full on Wednesday. In the games they played with Knox, but with Kincaid in the lineup, Stephon Diggs had a 30% target share with a 40% deep target share and 32% inside the red zone. Gabe Davis was second on the team at 15% target share, and then Dalton Kincaid at 13%. Now, Kincaid's role did get better towards the end of that stint with Knox because he had 7 or 8 targets in Knox's final healthy game before the wrist injury. So, like, it was getting better. And I think another reason to expect them to kind of go back to that is like you look at their passing efficiency in 2 tight end sets. They're at 0.25 EPA per dropback in 2 tight end sets, according to Next Gen Stats, whereas they're at 0.09 in 3 receiver sets. And their success rate goes up 10 percentage points in 2 tight end sets. Passing, they're a lot better rushing team with 3 receivers out there because it spreads the field out, stuff like that. But like, I think they're going to use Knox. I think they're going to have Knox out there quite a bit. So that hurts my confidence in Davis, hurts my confidence in Kincaid. So I agree with you, like from the perspective of Allen is tougher to stack than Lamar, because I think there are 3 guys I feel pretty solid about Lamar. With that said, I will still use Gabe Davis pretty heavily. I know Davis is very frustrating, but he's been very good to me. I feel like I've had an okay read on him in general throughout his career, and I like him a lot this week. You look at the guys who've done well against the Chiefs, it's a lot of like secondary options. Josh Palmer had a $133. Josh Palmer had a $133 against them. Devontae Smith did well against them. And the primary guys have been shut down. So I'm not saying don't use Stephon Diggs. You should use Stephon Diggs, but Davis at 68 is on my radar once again this week. I mentioned before the 15% target share in the games with Knox, but he also had a 35% deep target share and scored a lot of touchdowns in those games because he was, or I guess he did not. I lied. No, yeah, he had a lot of touchdowns in those games. So due for regression maybe, but also getting deep work. So I think he sets up well again for this game.
Yeah, I historically have just for me, Gabe Davis at this point is game stacks only, and this is a game stack that I want.
Yeah.
So I think the salary is a little higher than it should be, but it does, it does capture what his upside can be. So I'll have exposure. Would you consider Davis in your primary lineup, or do you think that there's too much of a risk
I don't care
that
about
he
the
gets
risk.
phased out?
I don't care about the risk, honestly. Like in my
Okay.
main lineup, I said before that like there's a chance that Allen is in my main lineup. And if I use Allen, there is a very high likelihood that Davis is the guy I stack him with. So yes, I'd consider him there. Like I used my main lineup 2 weeks ago against the Eagles. So like I did it then. No reason not to do it now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine with it. I don't see myself quite getting there, but like you pointed out, if I'm playing Allen, I probably should just have a stack.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I think he's the most stackable.
Yeah.
So, oh brother,
Let's talk about the Chiefs side of things from the pass catching first. Travis Kelce, 8,000. Think that's kind of low. Hasn't had like a ton of blow up games recently, but the yardage has been there. Rashee Rice, 63. Very nice target totals the past 2 games, 10 and 9 the past 2 weeks. And that came after a report where they were like, we're going to prioritize getting the ball to our good players. And apparently that includes Rashee Rice, not shockingly there. So Rice's salary is 63, can help offset a lot of the salary tied to Mahomes or Josh Allen. So I think Rice, Brandon, is in play outside of game stacks. Where are you at on him and then Kelce as well?
yeah. So Rashee Rice has had, just double checking here, single game target shares of 31.3% and 30% in his past 2 games. I'm fine. One of the hardest parts of DFS is finding the right samples, thinking about what you can trust. Full season stuff is for a lot of players fine, but especially younger players when there's like clear differentiation points, I'm fine changing my opinion real quick.
Yeah.
This team needs a receiver who can do something. Rice is that, I think, or at least he's the Chiefs version of like he can be the number 2 behind Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
I think Rice is. I don't say he's my favorite receiver play because I really like Zay Flowers as well, but he's in that conversation set as just the top receiver play at salary. So going to have a lot of Rashee Rice, and I think I feel pretty safe with it based on how involved he's been.
How about Kelce? Is he a priority for you at 8,000?
He sure is. He is second in targets per game, first in yards per game at the position. Buffalo's kind of like limited downfield passing from an ADOT standpoint against tight ends, but does kind of have like a high target per route rate. And I'm like, we love Travis Kelce because he can get downfield work, but if he gets a bunch of like 8-yard targets underneath, because that's kind of what they're forcing. They're trying to play deep and not let Mahomes burn them with some tosses to MVS that rarely go well. But I think that Kelce, the path for him to have just a really, I can't say floor anymore ever, but like I have a hard time envisioning Kelce coming away from this game getting iced out.
Yeah. And I think that like the box score looking like what it looks like will keep his roster rate in check. It won't be low, but it'll be in check. And I think that's a positive for us as well. Let's talk about the backfield here. Isaiah Pacheco, $7,000. I've used him pretty aggressively the past 2 weeks. Single game slate for one of them, main slate for the other, because Jerick McKinnon was out. Now, McKinnon probably going to play this week after he got in a limited session on Wednesday. Pacheco did not practice with a shoulder contusion. Now, shoulder contusion to me is less serious. I don't like shoulder injuries for running backs in general, but contusion worries me a bit less. So right now with Pacheco at 7,000, I am very on board. And if I have Josh Allen as my quarterback, might have Pacheco with Rice as my 2 bringbacks in that Josh Allen lineup. Where you got a Pacheco at 7,000? Let's assume McKinnon does go.
So I'm gonna say I'm gonna disregard your question. Like I feel like if McKinnon were out, 7,000 is a little low for Pacheco.
Very low. I think it's aggressively. He should be 77 without McKinnon.
Yeah, I know, but you always have like a multiplier for Pacheco in your head. So with McKinnon,
it's worked out the past 2 weeks.
With McKinnon, I think it's fair at worst. So I still think that a little bit of a downtick in his usage is still justifiable at 7,000, especially compared to the other backs in that range. We like a lot of them, but none of them are perfect, which is why their salaries are where they are. But you can overcome some of those imperfections by being in such a good game on such a good overall offense. So Pacheco with McKinnon, I would need a little more convincing to have him in like my primary lineup, but he's still very much in that conversation and probably would wind up there anyway because I like this game so much.
Yeah, I think that if McKinnon sits, I prefer Pacheco over Bijan Robinson. If Pacheco plays, then I think Bijan probably has a slight advantage over Pacheco in that scenario.
Yeah, that's probably like I think that was the name that jumped into my mind where, I'd have to.
And Zach Moss is above him regardless. So that's the other part of this. Any James Cook for you? His red zone role sucks. He gets sent to a cage basically whenever they get inside the 20, but he gets a lot of yardage and he could score a long touchdown. So I at least have to ask, will you use James Cook at all on Sunday?
Will I use him? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, let's play this game. James Cook at 66 or Brees at 64?
Oh, Cook. I'm not using
Right.
Brees. Yeah, I think it's Cook or Javonte.
I was going to say Cook or Javonte. That was the next one.
Because Javonte, since his snaps went up, it's a 5-game sample has a 46% red zone share, 80.4 yards per game. Cook is at 86.6. So like pretty good from that, but like not a big enough edge for him. So like I'd rather go Javonte because of the red zone usage.
Yeah. So I think Cook's low enough where He'll be at like the tail end of my player pool.
Yeah, I'm going in with the assumption that I will not get there, and if I do, fine. That is what it is. Let's move to our second game, where we had the second highest total on the slate. That is between the Seahawks and the 49ers, heavily slanted towards the 49ers, as they are 10.5-point favorites. Total is 46.5, putting the 49ers implied team total at 28.5. The one concern here is that this is a repeat divisional matchup, and they just faced each other a few weeks ago on Thanksgiving. So does that fact dampen your enthusiasm at all for stacking this game?
Only a little. The thing for me, and when we talked about that Thanksgiving slate, I just thought that San Francisco was a substantially better team than the Seahawks, which wasn't like a hot take, but it was just, I didn't think that game was going to be particularly like close. It wasn't 31-13. I think that could be a similar situation this week where there just doesn't have to be a ton for the 49ers in terms of just constantly pushing it. I think they'd be fine putting a pretty big nail in the Seahawks season because they'd be 6-7 if they lost.
Would you make them the 5 seed in the NFC? Sorry, the 6 seed. I forgot Dallas.
So I just don't know how this one, I don't think this one stays competitive. I just think the 49ers are so good that it really hurts things for me. Now, any one of their stud players can really torch us. But I think the main thing here is that the spread being as big as it is lowers me on Brock Purdy and just bumps him out of the QB consideration set.
Yeah.
And that's nothing against Ayuk or Debo or Kittle or McCaffrey. But if I'm not playing your quarterback, I'm a little bit low. I just feel like someone's going to have a huge game. Probably two guys have a really good game, but not everyone can. And that's the hard part of narrowing it down. So I want to get here. I don't know how to prioritize it. I love McCaffrey, but I don't think I need to jam him in because we have so many running back options. So where are you with San Francisco?
Pretty similar to you, I think, last week against the Eagles, that was a game where it was supposed to be back and forth. So pretty high in the game stack. And as a result, I was okay using two of their studs in the same lineup, like Debo and McCaffrey and Ayuk, stuff like that. This week, I won't get there. I can use one per lineup, I think. I can have Debo in a lineup. I can have McCaffrey. That's totally fine. I don't think I can get to two, though, because of the potential for this game to get out of hand. In the past, I would have said with Elijah Mitchell being banged up again, shocker, I'd have been like, okay, McCaffrey's now a priority again. But Jordan Mason has looked really good this year, so I don't think that actually changes things too much as far as McCaffrey's projected workload. So I still do like McCaffrey. If you give me 3 single entry lineups, I'm probably going to get there in one. But if I don't get there, it's the lowest I viewed him in terms of a prioritization in a bit, given the salary's way up there, given that I do want to get to a high salary quarterback and tight end, stuff like that. I've got a lot of good mid-range running backs. So I want to get there if I have 3 single entry lineups or a 3 entry max tournament. But it's not going to ruin my day if I can't get there necessarily.
Yeah, I just don't know if the path to 30 plus is required.
Sure.
For him. It's always there because he's just so good. I just don't know if they'll need it. I think it comes down a lot to how you view the Seahawks, and maybe that's sort of the conversation we need to have next because we got to talk about their offense. But do you what does your model say about this game? Do you think
it says the 49ers should be favored by 2 touchdowns?
Yeah. So it's tough. And look, San Francisco's had a lot of big wins. Their guys can still produce, but it's just hard from a process standpoint to think that that's a high probability. And then look, McCaffrey, if he gets 25, that's awesome. No one's turning that down. But at 10-5, that's still kind of, you need him to be Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
His salary was wasn't it in the 9,000 last week?
98, because Tyreek Hill was 10,000. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. If he were 98, it'd be a different conversation, I think.
I agree.
So I think he's just kind of almost maxed out, and I don't quite need to get there. So tell me about the Seahawks. What are you thinking?
I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba as a salary saver. We've alluded to him a couple of times, but the target numbers and the target depth have been improving recently. He's had a deep target in now, I think, 4 consecutive games, whereas he just was not getting those earlier on this year. He had 4 in a game where he's had one in 3 straight games. He had 4 in a game where Geno got hurt. But 2 are from Geno, 2 are from Drew Lock, who's a total D-gapper. So that makes a lot of sense. But last week, 11 targets for Smith and Jigba, and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett both had 8. So I think what we've seen is a phasing out of like the quaternary options. Did I use that right?
Yeah.
Sweet. So they're getting phased out, and we're kind of narrowing down to those 3 guys, which is good for Smith and Jigba. Salary still low at 55. Gonna have to throw a lot in that game. So I think that given the trajectory he's shown recently, good value play. So I'm okay with Smith and Jigba. If both the running backs play, I'm not going to use them. If neither running back plays, I'm not going to use DJ Dallas, even at $4,500, because I think he's not that good. I think one of them will play at least. So I'm probably avoiding the backfield. I think it's really just about JSN for me personally. What about for you?
Yeah, I never thought we'd see the day where Seattle had a true tertiary option, but
Right.
we have that with JSN, and I think he's the play. I don't know if it's weird that we wouldn't necessarily consider their top 2 pass catchers at reasonable salaries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of I mean, DK Metcalf's gonna be really popular, right? That's
I don't think
fairly
so.
popular. Coming off a huge game.
It is Thursday. People forgotten by now.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know. What
Traditionally, yes, people do point chase, but also they could point chase with the guy right above him on the team with the higher implied total.
That's true.
Although it's not point chasing because Debo is actually a good play this week, but it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I could see like Debo and DK being a pretty common pairing, but I just don't fear teams going against the 49ers at this point. They're just so good.
I don't either.
Like it's a little dismissive, but
yeah.
When's the last time they had like a true competitive like back and
last
forth
week?
game?
Oh, I guess not even last week. Supposed to be competitive. Was not.
Yeah, I know, but like
I want to go back to Debo for a second. The reason why I think that he's not point chasey is that looking at the games they've had, all those guys healthy, and exclude the games where Debo is banged up, he's now up to 86.2 yards in scrimmage per game in that sample. Ayuk is at 79.8 in that sample. Kittle 56.8. Debo's red zone usage is 16%, which is much better than both Ayuk and Kittle. So I think when Debo's healthy, he's still the guy. And I also don't like using outside receivers like Ayuk against teams like Seattle, given their cornerback quality. So I think that Debo, once again, a very good play at 75. Are you on board with Debo this week, assuming you don't have McCaffrey in your lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I think my default assumption is that I'll take advantage of the mid-range running backs whenever we have them.
Mm-hmm.
And Debo will fit my lineup a lot better. He had 3 carries last week for 22 yards and a touchdown. You mentioned Elijah Mitchell being banged up. I think that helps Debo as well. He's just such a unique skill set, and he's very, very good as well. So I think that Debo, frankly, I should be higher, even though I think this game doesn't stay competitive. The way that games don't get like that they're no longer competitive is one team has to score some points. I think that flows through Debo, but I think it's Debo over Ayuk for me at this point, based on usage and the carries and like cool red zone touches he gets. I feel good with that. But where are you with George Kittle? Because his salary is very reasonable. He could have a big game, but I think, again, he doesn't necessarily need to have a game for them to just walk away with a safe win.
So you said his salary is reasonable. I would say it's actually low. I think that I'd actually put in that department. Again, I've had a pretty big turnaround on Kittle personally from where I used to be. Like, it was like, okay, if Debo and Ayuk are healthy, I'm not going to get there. But like, he's been getting a lot more downfield work this year. Didn't get any last week, but that's because it was rainy and they didn't throw deep at all last week. But like still had 68 yards in that game. I think that for 66, if I'm not using Kelsey, I'm not stacking Isaiah Likely with Lamar Jackson, I probably want to get to Kittle. So he's probably my tight end 3 or tight end 2 this week, considering salary. So I'm pretty high on him personally.
Yeah, I said reasonable. Look, he can do a lot with any target, which is what makes him just an elite tight end. But when I see like the target totals being what they are, I have a hard time viewing Kittle as like and again, I know you don't care about any sort of semblance of safety, but I think this is a pretty high salary for someone who could see 4, 5, 6 targets in a game that they don't really need to throw in. That's kind of where I'm a little bit more hesitant, but I would agree with you where I think there's kind of like 3.5 tight end plays who kind of jump out to me even a little bit.
At most.
Yeah. So Kittle's definitely one of them. And if I can get there in my main lineup, I'd be fine with it. I don't know if I can quite justify or get to Kelsey in my main lineup, although I'll have to kind of figure that one out because I'm really prioritizing quarterback. But yeah, Kittle's in play. So it sounds like I started this whole thing saying like I think this game's not going to be competitive enough to play everyone, but all 4 of their big, their big 4s in play. I just want to be a little bit lower than I typically would be if this were a more competitive environment
and less overlap between their individual players too than what I would typically be okay with. But I'll say like a Kittle JSN mini game stack is pretty fun, I would say, for this week. Let's finish up with our third bookmaker game for this week, which is actually probably the lowest total we've had for a bookmaker game since we started having this section in the podcast. That is the Rams at the Ravens. The reason it's in here is because the Ravens implied total is actually the next highest in the slate of teams we have not discussed at 24 right now. Total for this game is 40.5 at the spread at 7.5 in favor of Baltimore. Wind speed has come down a bit throughout the week. I actually took the over in this game yesterday when it was at 40.5 and is still there. So no movement in my favor. Boo-hoo. Still 13 miles per hour. Still a bit high in terms of wind, but not terrible. So are you prioritizing an exposure to players in this game?
Prioritizing exposure to the Ravens, yes, for sure. Like I said, it's between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen for me for my QB1 for the week. I feel good enough with Lamar to want to get there. His rushing workload has been, pure Lamar levels, 11, 9, 8, 10 carries over his past 4 for 39, 54, 41, and 60. He's getting like, you about to whisper something?
And 0 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He only has 1 rushing touchdown in his past 8 games. He has 20 rushing attempts in the red zone in that time.
Let me see. Yeah, he should have about.
He had 4 red zone rushing touchdowns in his first 7 carries. So like he was due for regression then, but now he's due for some positive regression recently.
Yeah, he should have about 2 more rushing touchdowns this year than he does have. Ooh. Also, shout out, you caught out the Mahomes one. I have him at 3.9. He should have like almost 4 rushing touchdowns. So, based on my modeling there, but
his touchdown regression. 4, so he's due. Let's go.
Yeah, with the rushing being what it is, and then what really, really helps out is 3 very easy justifications from a game stat or just a stacking standpoint for him. Yeah. With Zay Flowers, very reasonable salary, Odell Beckham, and then thankfully for us, because tight end's not great. If you can stack a tight end with one of the top 2 QBs, Isaiah Likely, 5,200, I'm very much on board with that. So. With all of that in mind, I might say like the Ravens are my favorite offense of the week because they're so
all things considered,
affordable.
Yes. Yeah.
Like they're just affordable and have paths to big games.
And I think that you can like go with a Ravens stack. You can bring it back with Puka Nacua and you can still get exposure to Bills Chiefs very easily. Like let's just have some fun here. Let's go crazy. Okay. So we got Lamar. Let's put in Odell. I'm going to put Likely in there too, just because it's very low salaried. We'll bring it back with Puka. And then I'm going to put my boy Gabe in. Oh, I had the filter on. Okay. Gabe Davis. And we'll go Pacheco. I'm going to plug in which defense? Browns. Oh, there are too many. There we go. Okay. $79.50 left for a running back and a flex. So like you can use Lamar, double stack him, have a bring back, and still get exposure to Bills Chiefs very easily. So like I still might get down in my primary lineup, but that's a big key in Lamar's favor for a primary lineup is having that much flexibility with the guys you want to stack him with. Do you have a preference between Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham, and Isaiah Likely with Lamar?
I mean, Zay, I would say is the easiest one to justify. The role's been there. I think he's really good. He can get some creative touches as well, but secondarily, probably just Likely because he satisfies the need for a tight end. And he was second in targets on the team without Andrews. He's got some yardage upside. We've seen him be good, without Andrews. So, I wouldn't say he's like I miss the days of like Trey McBride at like 51 at his peak, but I don't think it's quite to that level. But given the whole context of the tight end slate this week, Likely at 52 definitely jumps out to me.
And he's the best low salary tight end, correct?
Yeah, I like another name though too. Someone who leads all tight ends in downfield targets on the season, more than even Travis Kelce. He's got 9 more than anyone other.
Pitts.
Than Travis Kelce. It's Kyle Pitts.
No, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. I thought you were going to say like or David and Joker or something, and I was going to yell at you, but Pitts is fine. Yeah, I think that I like Odell a bit more. And like, it's not a good process based thing because Odell's snaps, you look at them for this year, they've been bad. He hasn't had big snap rates the entire year. I think that some context is important with those though, because he has been on the injury report in all but 3 weeks so far this year. In one of the games, he was not in the injury report. He left early with an injury. I think he actually left early in 2 of those. But in one of them, before he left early, he had 116 yards. He is not on the injury report at all this week for only the 4th time this year, coming out of their bye week. He has 2.3 yards per route run this year and a 26% target share on the routes he's run. So if we get a healthier version of Odell with no Mark Andrews, I think the upside there is big. So I will have Odell in non-Lamar lineups. I think that he's very friendly outside of game stacks. I think that it's kind of on the assumption he's healthier now is what leads me towards Odell Beckham. Is that too far of a reach for you to kind of say, okay, he's healthy now, therefore I can use him? What are your thoughts on Odell 57?
I think he's viable, but he's my clear number 3. It sounds like you like him more than. Do you like him more than Likely or Zay?
Well, I'm probably going to have Likely in every Lamar lineup. So he's not even like a consideration for me, I guess, in this.
So you like Odell more than Zay?
Given respective salaries, I might. It's a tough call though, I would say.
I think I need to be sold a little bit harder on that just because Zay's consistently been like the guy. Again, I'm going to play Odell, but if I have a Lamar, if my main lineup is Lamar, I'm going to play Likely. In that case, I'm probably more likely to play Odell, just to save the max salary. But if I don't play Likely and I want to, like, if I'm playing a Kelce or Kittle tight end lineup, I think I'd probably just go Zay there.
Okay, that's fair. Let's talk about the bringbacks here on the Rams side. Are you prioritizing a bringback in your Ravens stacks? I think I am, just because like I think the Rams will be fine in this game, and I know where the ball is going, and that's primarily to Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams. So, and I think that Puka's salary is like lower than it should be at 76. So I will bring it back with Puka Nacua. I'll bring it back with Kyron Williams. I will not bring it back with Cooper Kupp. Where are you at on the Rams side of things here?
Yeah, Puka hasn't had a single game target share under 20% all year. His lowest was 20.6% in week 13. The salaries, dropping or like stabilizing in recent weeks. He's getting banged up. It seems like more and more, which is,
and he keeps coming back. It's absurd. Like, take this guy out for his own health, but like if he's going to keep playing, I'll keep playing him.
Like He's got that ceiling. I know we don't care about like a floor. I think there's a little bit more of a wide range of outcomes for him in this matchup than I would necessarily want to see at 76. That being said, in Lamar stacks, I have to bump him up because I'm sort of assuming that this game is productive on both sides in that case. So I'm there with Nakua. I have a hard time though sitting here and saying that I would play Puka Nakua over Chris Olave or Debo Samuel in like
I might use him over Olave just because I like this game more.
that's fine, but Olave is a monster and he's playing indoors and doesn't matter who their quarterback is, he gets just peppered. So
I mean, so does Puka. Just saying, I like Olave too, but I think the Puka is pretty fun. I'm just gonna ask this, like,
oh boy,
any interest in Keaton Mitchell or no? Like by any, I mean any.
Any.
The case for Mitchell is that he had a 46% snap rate before their bye. It's a rookie coming out of a bye week. He's been really good to the point where like you would think they'd want to get him more work. And he actually does earn targets, which is weird for a Ravens running back. So I'm currently at a no. And I don't think I'll get there, but like I could be talked into it real fast, potentially at $5,900.
If this were any other team, I'd be a little more inclined, but they never want to give any running backs more than like a 55 to 60% snap share. And, if you get a 55% snap share for a player this good in this offense at 59, like that's very reasonable.
That's
but
only up 9 percentage points from where he was before their bye week.
Yeah, I'm saying like I don't know if that's going to happen, and there's an inherent cap on his role, and I would not be surprised if he does everything between the 20s and then they just bring in anybody else. So I don't hate it. I think it's a good call out. I have a hard time tying lineups to someone who could bog down the rest of my lineup.
I think that if I had like a Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Travis Kelce lineup and I really needed to save salary, I would consider it, but that'd be like the one scenario which I would get there.
I think if you're playing Mitchell, you don't do it to like have a lot of mid-range plays. You do it for that type of lineup.
He was like kind of what Zach Moss was last week, where you use him to get access to other guys. And I think that's worth something. He's currently a no in my player pool, but a yes on my radar for this week. Let's dig in now to the trends across week number 14. You're going to talk about the Bears running back defense because Jahmyr Gibbs' salary is pretty low at 69 this week. David Montgomery, Revenge Game Part 2, is also not that high salaried. So talk to me about the Bears defense and what we should expect out of them against the Lions this week.
Yeah, a lot of mid-range running backs. One team that has two is the Lions. Usually when you have two running backs, for us, you don't have one. But this team's kind of operating a little bit differently. Montgomery's salary of 7,600, very reasonable. Jahmyr Gibbs, 69, very, very reasonable as well. Last week, the Lions got a big early on the Saints, and that kind of skewed things from the trends we've been seeing with both of these guys back and active. But David Montgomery played 61% of the snaps, had 18 carries and 2 targets. Jahmyr Gibbs' snap rate was 46%, 8 carries, 2 targets. Did have more routes with 14 compared to Montgomery with 11. But in the first half, again, that game got out of hand pretty quickly. Both had a 55.9% snap rate. So I think that's intriguing. But now we have 4 games with David Montgomery back after Jahmyr Gibbs had his breakout. And if you look at that 4-game sample, it still favors Jahmyr Gibbs pretty heavily. 59% snap rate, 66% route rate, 30% red zone share in terms of carries plus targets for the team. Montgomery, by comparison, 41% snap rate, 23% of the routes, and a 32% red zone share. So we basically had 3 games saying Gibbs is still the guy, and then a blowout game saying that they're going to ride David Montgomery a little bit more, especially in the second half because their snaps were the same in the first half. But this is also really intriguing because of the Bears running back defense. They are really good against the rush in a lot of different metrics. Second in rushing yards over expectation per carry allowed to running backs, according to Next Gen Stats. Top 8 in rushing success rate allowed to running backs. Third in traditional yards per carry. allowed to running backs. But out of the backfield, and I double checked this stuff. Some of these things sound kind of crazy, but I believe that they're all true based on the numbers that I have. They've allowed 713 receiving yards to running backs. No other team has allowed more than 594. They're letting up 1.89 yards per route run to running backs. The NFL average for running backs is 1.08. It's basically like a Devontae Smith level yards per route run for running backs against the Bears, which is wild. They're letting up 0.18 EPA per dropback to running backs, with the league average being minus 0.1. They're letting up 7.9 yards per attempt to running backs. The league average is 5.5. And we kind of saw this play out a little bit in their first matchup. You're grimacing, so I don't know if you're seeing anything, but it always makes me nervous when I'm like going over stuff and you're grimacing. But
I was searching for Isaiah Pacheco updates and saw a lot of like fan voting for the Pro Bowl, and that's why I grimaced. Sorry, I can't hide my emotions.
well, I'm like, am I? Do I have everything wrong or something?
No, I'm just trying to find info on a guy's injury, and all I get is Pro Bowl voting. Why is Pro Bowl voting done on Twitter? Sorry, continue.
In the first matchup, which was pretty recent in Week 11, Jahmyr Gibbs 56% snap rate, 57% route rate, 6 targets for 59 yards, 8 carries, 30% of the red zone rushes or red zone opportunities overall. David Montgomery even did some stuff out of the backfield, 22 yards on his 2 targets, but 12 carries, 76 yards and a touchdown. So like, I think they're both somewhat in play. I think Gibbs will be easily sort of forgotten about already. And this matchup out of the backfield could be very, very fruitful for him at a salary of 6,900. If he takes back over again, he had 3 weeks where he was the lead back in the committee. Then the game script kind of put things on Montgomery last week. I'm not saying Gibbs is on par with some of the other names because this is a risk that could happen. This could have just shifted, signaled a shift. But again, that first half snap rate being equal, I kind of think Jahmyr Gibbs could be the featured back in this offense again this week for a sub 7,000 salary. That's really appealing to me. Do you have interest in Gibbs? Do you have interest in any other Lions? What are your thoughts on this one?
Gibbs, yes. He was actually a player pick for me until I read more about Isaiah Pacheco's shoulder injury being a contusion. So like that talked me into putting Pacheco back in there. But I had Gibbs in there initially. I think he's a really good contribution to that mid-range. So like as a pivot in that mid-range, because like you said, I think people will gloss over him, despite the fact his salary is down, despite the fact, like you said, the Bears are terrible against running back targets. So I think that he makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to get to any other Lions because salaries are high. This game is outdoors. The wind has come down quite a bit. It's now 10 miles per hour as opposed to, I think, like 18 earlier on this week. So that's good. So less off of this game in general, but I think it's still really just Gibbs for me. But I'm pretty interested personally. I'm not going to get to Montgomery, I don't think, but like I can be okay with Gibbs for sure.
Yeah, if not for the like actual rushing matchup being so difficult, I think I would really, really like place Gibbs in a higher like a higher priority. But
yeah,
I mean, he played 58, 56, and 70% of the snaps with Montgomery back. Like,
yeah.
And you always have a better read on this kind of stuff than I do. Do you think like he has a 60% like snap rate? Like they go back to the role that he had, or do you think it's still more like trends more 50-50 because of what they did last week?
I would think 50-50 because Montgomery was on the field for like a third and like moderate, which was surprising to me. I don't know. I didn't like look at the numbers, just like watching. I know that Montgomery's out there for one where I didn't expect him to be on the field. So pass catching may not be as heavily in Gibbs's favor as it was before, but like I still think it like 50-50 is still fine when it's a dynamic player and a good offense. So I'm fine with it personally still. Let's talk about the other side of that game. Because it's also decently attractive. Again, assuming the weather holds where it is right now. The Lions defense has been rough recently, so I think it's at least worth digging into this Bears offense with Justin Fields to see if there's anything we can take advantage of for this week. Fields has finished 7 games this year. In those games, the Bears' average pass rate over expectation is negative 3.9%, according to NFL Faster. They were at negative 6.7% with Tyson Bagent. So they are more willing to let him chuck it, even if they aren't super pass heavy. The one exception, though, was weirdly against the Lions in week 11. Their PROE there was negative 12.9%. That could have been because it was Fields' first game back off his thumb injury, but it was odd. And it's especially odd because the Lions defense ranks 25th against the pass and 7th against the rush. So similar to the Bears, better against the rush than the pass. The Bears did go more pass heavy against the Vikings in week 12, and they're similar to Detroit where they're pretty good against the run. But regardless, it was hard to pin down what the approach might be here. But we do know the Fields will push the ball to DJ Moore as much as possible. DJ Moore in games with Fields, 29% target share. Cole Kmet is at 20%. Moore has a 40% deep target share. Kmet has a 25% red zone target share. Moore's salary is 77. That's pretty high. I'm unlikely to get there unless I'm using Fields. Kmet is 56. That's easier to get to outside of game stacks, but I'd also rather spend up for a guy like Kittle or spend down for Isaiah Likely. Well, Kmet's in the likely tier, I guess. So if the win stays where it's at right now, I'm receptive to Fields plus a pass catcher, but I can't view them as a priority. And I can't get super excited here, even if there are some positives. So what are your thoughts on the Bears in this matchup? Would you consider a Fields lineup with a Gibbs bring back? What do you view in this game overall?
I think they're fine. I think Fields by himself with Gibbs is the most likely exposure I would get to this game.
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of playing into Fields having a good game,
Rushing.
the Lions throwing it, having Gibbs involved, having him break some big plays. I think they're basically, I thought there were 5 QBs in play. I think Purdy's probably falling out of that for me the more that I think about it. But Fields is probably the QB4 behind Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, sort of the 1A, 1B, then Mahomes.
I agree.
Then I think it's Fields. And I don't know how you consider anyone else, honestly. That, like, you don't have to get cute at quarterback. That's not really how it works. And honestly, with the upside of these guys, you probably don't want to get cute because we have a lot of swipes at guys getting like 35 FanDuel points, and it's hard to replace that. Even if you get 22 from someone at like 7,000 or 7,200, it's hard to make up those points unless you're, using that salary to play McCaffrey and he goes for 40 or something like that. But for Fields, it is intriguing. He's got 18 and 12 rushing attempts the past 2 games, tons of yardage. And as you pointed out, with Lamar, didn't score in either of those on that amount of carries. I don't have the numbers pulled up, his expected rushing touchdowns, but I can in a second if Excel doesn't crash.
He has only 1 this year.
Justin Fields should have 3.7 more rushing touchdowns than he has.
Okay.
Is overachieving from a passing standpoint, but
sure.
Give me them rushing touchdowns, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So I think he's the QB4.
Yeah. So the question is, do you get to a 4th quarterback or do you stick with 3? I think that's the key question this week because I'm in the same boat as you as far as the ranking of those guys.
That would depend on how many lineups.
Yeah.
If I'm building like 20, I'd probably want to stick to 3.
Sure.
I feel good with that because there's a lot of different combinations. And
Correct,
again, a lot of game stacks, mini stacks that I'm not sold on. So that's probably the way that I would go.
I agree. Okay, let's move to your second trend. Talk about a fun return with Justin Jefferson fully back. First game for him with Joshua Dobbs facing the Raiders, who are leaky. So what do you see here with the Vikings getting Justin Jefferson back in the lineup?
Yeah, haven't seen him in a while. The return, it's not going to sneak up on anyone, but I feel like everyone who comes back from injury is a little bit less popular than they deserve to be. But Jefferson, I think he's ready to be back at this point. He has been practicing since week 10. He's going to be good to go. And at that rate, like, he might be the guy. Like, after this, I'll probably ask you, like, Alvin Kamara or Justin Jefferson, if you were to flex one just to sort of,
I think the question is McCaffrey or Jefferson, even though their salary's not the same. I think that's the question.
Well, it was the exact salary. That's all. I thought, and I was going to say we're both going to like lean Jefferson. I was playing into something. I was just
Sorry. I just got offended you were comparing to Kamara.
So if you give him like 4 full games this year, he has 11.5 targets per game, 8.3 catches per game for 135.8 yards per game, 0.8 touchdowns, 30.5% target share, 43% air yard share, 5.8 downfield targets per game, which is for me is at least 10 yards downfield. 19% red zone target share. The red zone stuff was the only thing that like, you could kind of nitpick a little bit, but I'm not going to because he's really good and that'll go up eventually. But 150, 159, and 149 yards in his first 3 games, and his fourth game where he had just 85 yards, he scored twice. So it's a beatable matchup. Indoors as well. The question or like the thing here is like we haven't seen him with the QB downgrade, and that's a fair question to sort of ask. So looking at Dobbs, like I didn't really see enough to move away from Jefferson. He's got like bad EPA numbers because he turns it over a ton, but his success rate numbers are fine, and he's been doing that without Justin Jefferson. And like spoiler alert, Justin Jefferson's a difference maker, so I think the efficiency will probably go up whenever you're throwing it in his direction. But as I mentioned, getting in limited practices since week 10, and like that's such a good sign. Elite receivers can overcome moderate like quarterback efficiency. I don't really see like anything here to move away. I kind of went into the show not even remembering trending this on Monday. But like should Jefferson be in our main lineups?
I don't know if I'll get there for my like if I have one lineup, but like I'd like to get there if I have 2.
Yeah.
Like I kind of think that's where I'm at because like he's sick. He's playing indoors in a slate that has a lot of gross low totals, and I did take the under in this game, so that's worth noting. But like it is Jefferson and Dobbs, like he's at least good enough to support viable pass catchers.
Yeah.
So I'm into it personally. You can like I built a Mahomes Jefferson lineup. Like it wasn't with Kelsey. I just been down for likely at tight end. So it was Mahomes, Rashee Rice, Gabe Davis. I could make it work. Given the mid-range running backs, I think that a Lamar Jefferson lineup is very easy to make. So yeah, I think if you're talking like one-offs on, I keep saying like, if you're talking one-offs on this slate, is he the best one-off? Like in a game that was in our bookmaker section?
I don't know how he's not.
Yeah.
I know it's a downgrade in terms of efficiency and rapport, but he's been practicing, he's been with the team. Like that stuff matters.
Yeah.
Although I saw a tweet, I can't remember who tweeted it. It was Josh Dobbs is getting worse the more that he knows his teammates. But
that's pretty funny.
Yeah. Jefferson, I think if I'm taking savings at running back, Travis Kelce's very appealing, and I love Travis Kelce. I think I should probably try to prioritize those savings for Justin Jefferson, though.
You have one lineup, and you're forced to use either McCaffrey or Jefferson. Are you going Jefferson?
Yes, because I have numerous running backs to choose from.
Sure. Okay.
And that's a $1,500 salary gap.
I think I agree. So let's talk about my second trend here and talk about the Broncos defense. They've gotten a lot of buzz recently for their improvements. And if you look at the full season numbers, they're still pretty poor. So I want to dig in to see if we should target Chargers against them this week. It's an indoor game. Chargers are favored, decent implied total. So let's dig in. Broncos rank 27th against the pass and 30th against the rush overall this year. They're the only team ranked outside the top 25 in both those categories. They have legitimately been better recently, though. They've exceeded expectations on early downs against the pass in 5 consecutive games. 3 of those were barely better than expected, but like they well exceeded expectations against both the Chiefs and the Bills. Against the rush, they've outperformed expectations in now 3 straight, and they've been really good on late downs, again, adjusting for matchups. I honestly think this gives us an out to be lower on the Chargers, something I would really like to do, because since the Joshua Palmer injury, Justin Herbert is at 0.03 passing net expected points per dropback, which is bad. League average around 0.07, I think, or so this year. I could be wrong in that, but like it's been below average regardless. They've had only one like really good offensive game since Palmer got hurt. They lost 41-38 to the Lions. We also saw Austin Eckler's snaps dip in week 13. He played just 57% of the snaps. His first time under 66% since week 7, which was the second game off the ankle injury. The Broncos haven't been excelling against the run as long as they've been good against the pass. And Eckler's salary is low at 75. So I could see him being tempting. And I don't think a lot of people will use him. I just think the role reduction paired with the improvements for the Broncos defense is enough to keep me off. Keenan Allen's getting fed 14 plus targets in 3 of the 5 games Palmer has missed. He can torch us, but I'd much rather use Jefferson than Keenan Allen personally. So maybe Palmer does come back. We can boost the offense because Herbert was at 0.24 passing net expected points per dropback in the games with Palmer without Mike Williams. Then maybe we can consider the passing game. But I think I'm out on Eckler. I might not touch the offense unless Palmer is back. Is that too dismissive, Brandon, of an indoor game with a decent total and a tight spread?
I wouldn't say it's too dismissive. I do think that this is, as I was talking about at the top of the show, trying to find like the game within the slate that has some appeal that isn't as super obvious or has, you know, enough question marks where I don't think people will really get in. This could be that game. The Chargers they've been a really problematic offense for me all season. They've frankly have been. It always feels like their output doesn't quite match expectation and like potential. Yeah. So I do think though that this is one of those spots where a mini stack could be appealing, even a running back stack. The problem for me with Eckler though is like, in addition to everything, he's been really inefficient.
Yeah.
Like really, really inefficient. And he's not getting enough of like the high leverage work. They're not moving the ball quite to the extent that they need to for him just to walk in touchdowns. So
do you have FOMO with him anymore?
Not really.
I don't either.
And for a while, we were playing him out of FOMO. Yeah. And early on this year, I feel like I was playing him out of preference.
Yeah.
But things are different now. Again, the efficiency is just really, really worrisome. And if he can't break anything, which he kind of hasn't been for a while, I'm fine missing out. Do you envision any mini stacks here? Because I know you mentioned Javonte.
If Palmer plays, I could go Javonte with Palmer. That might be it, though.
What about where's Courtland
Sutton? Is 72, which is not terrible given his workload. Like he's had a really good target share recently. So like I don't think Sutton's out of play. I just think that because I like a lot of receivers in the games I want to stack, I'm not going to have a lot of one-off wide receivers, and I'd rather use my one-off receiver slots on different guys, like a one-off in a game that I'm not stacking within that lineup, basically, you know, like a Rashee Rice or something.
Yeah, I have Sutton with 5.4 more touchdowns than expectation as well. I think that's kind of just boosting him up a bit. So while I think this game has appeal as like a game theory differentiation mini stack standpoint, I don't necessarily know if I'm going to get there.
Okay. I think I agree with you right now, unless again, Palmer plays and I can go Javonte Palmer, then maybe. Weather for this week, big one is in Baltimore for the Rams and the Ravens. Right now, wind speeds projected at 12 miles per hour. There is drizzle in the forecast. Don't care about that, but the wind speed does downgrade this piece a bit. Still would rank it pretty high, but it does downgrade them at least a bit. In Cleveland for the Browns and the Jaguars right now, rain in the forecast, wind speed projected at 10 miles per hour, which is why The total is so low at 30.5. So we talked about that before, not being super high there. That's part of why. In Chicago, for the Lions and the Bears, wind speeds right now 11 miles per hour. Again, better than it was. Still not perfect, but not terrible either for that game. In East Rutherford for the Jets and Texans, wind speeds there 10 miles per hour with more rain in the forecast for that one as well. Check back on the intensity of the rain. Probably not going to be there. Regardless, though, other games do look pretty okay as far as the main slate goes. So check back on the weather for Baltimore primarily, but then also for Chicago and Detroit to make sure we're not changing outlook on that one too much. Let's dig in now to our positional plays for week number 14. Brandon, starting off at quarterback, who are you turning to there?
I got two. Not going to surprise anyone if they've been listening. Josh Allen. The Chiefs and Bills are in the game of the week, at least from a quality standpoint. Might not be the highest scoring game, might be a little bit uglier, but I don't think it's going to work out that way exactly. In part because both teams need wins. The Bills desperately need a win. They are on the road, but they're coming off of a bye. They should have some answers figured out. They should have some wrinkles in the offense. And if you just compare like Josh Allen to Mahomes in this game, I think that you'd have to do some real convincing to say that Mahomes is the better play from a process standpoint. Of course, game theory is one thing, but the Chiefs are a good overall defense. They've got a pass defense top 6 in EPA per drop back based on a numberFire's adjusted model. But in 3 games against top 8 pass defenses this season, Allen's at 277 passing yards, 2.7 touchdowns, over 20 rushing yards and 5 carries per game. I think everything starts with whether you're playing Josh Allen, and then from there, how you save is sort of the question. But with my interest going up drastically on Justin Jefferson, I think I would really like the savings with Lamar Jackson at 8,000. Again, there are some upside quarterbacks this week. If they go off, it's really hard to match that. Lamar, 8,000, very, very reasonable salary. It's a mid-level overall pass defense. And if you look at sort of Lamar versus mid-tier pass defenses, 212 yards per game, just 0.8 passing touchdowns, but really good success rate in this split, even with like subpar EPA numbers. But on the ground, 10 carries in these games, 61 yards, 0.4 touchdowns, and again, should be scoring more frequently. And the Rams are letting up 1.10 yards per carry over expectation to quarterbacks, according to Next Gen Stats. That's the second highest rate in football.
Yeah, Lamar is pretty fun. I'll talk about him in a second as well. But first, let's talk about Mahomes. Kind of the pitch for him. I do prefer Allen, like you said, and I agree with you that Allen's the better process play. But Mahomes hasn't blown up recently, but I think he's due for some rushing touchdown regression, as we discussed. No rushing touchdowns yet this year, but is averaging a career high 27.6 yards per game. The Bills defense is fine, but it does get dinged a bit once you adjust for schedule. So Mahomes 84 in a spot where I don't think a lot of people will use him, I find him pretty attractive. So I want to be on Patrick Mahomes in like single entry stuff for this week, especially. My second love is also Lamar Jackson. We talked about the rushing touchdown regression, but he also could get there via passing touchdown regression because his passing touchdown rate is 3.9%. That's his lowest in a season where he's been a full-time starter. He was lower his rookie year when he started like half the games for Joe Flacco, but he should regress in the passing touchdown department, could regress in the rushing touchdown department. If he doesn't, he has the lowest interception rate of his career. So he's playing really well, but it's not translated into fantasy just yet. The Rams are the 16th ranked overall defense. So I feel like even if the winds remain at 12 miles per hour, I'm probably still going to have Lamar Jackson as my head-to-head quarterback this week. I want the savings. Yeah, I know I'm telling you one of my players.
No.
What?
No, I moved off of Lamar because of wind against the Lions, and
yeah.
I still think about that.
I mean, he didn't play in the second half, so at least there's that, right?
It didn't matter.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be on Lamar pretty decently this week. I think especially if people stay away with this total being low, that makes him more attractive. So very into Lamar Jackson for this week. Moving to running back, who are you focusing on there?
This feels so weird, and it feels like maybe I'm getting too cute, but I don't have anyone in my loves with a salary over 7,100. That's not to say I don't like any running backs over 7,100, but we have so many options that I think I can get away with it this week. But I like Bijan Robinson a ton. I should probably say that I love him. But his role scaled up in recent weeks, at least 61% of the snaps in 5 straight games, over 72% in 3 of those 5, including 75% in week 13. 18 carries, 5 targets, 79 scrimmage yards last time out. There's a lack of efficiency here for the offense, but not necessarily for Bijan. It's a middling sort of matchup for the Buccaneers on the full season. You can kind of nitpick certain samples and say that they're good or bad or whatever, but overall, not enough to sort of avoid. So Bijan in this matchup at that salary, very much like him. Second love is going to be Isaiah Pacheco, assuming that things are good to go. If not, I have no problem really pivoting to Jahmyr Gibbs, but there are other names that we've mentioned. But Pacheco, the role's been up without Jerick McKinnon, and the thing is, even if McKinnon is back, it's not like Pacheco's not the guy. This isn't really how that works. He'll lose some leverage, but this salary being what it is and being in this game, it's all worth it for what Pacheco's. Again, you think he should be 7,700 without McKinnon, but
I know that's too low. I get it. It's too low,
but yeah, a back with this kind of workload, and again, might lose some but I don't know. He was still getting some targets and stuff with McKinnon there. So Pacheco is my second love, but I think the third love, and maybe this is something we haven't talked about enough, but is Zach Moss the play of the week again, or is that not quite the case?
So I might have him in every lineup again.
Yeah. And we didn't talk about that yet. We probably should have toward the top.
Potentially, yeah. Didn't think about that.
It just seems like he kind of slipped through.
Make that clear. At the 1 hour and 31 minute mark, I'm going to use Zach Moss in every lineup this week.
Yeah. As I was reading over my notes again, I was like, we probably should have talked about this sooner. but I don't know. Maybe we're in the minority there. I don't quite know, but
I don't think we will be.
Okay.
Because he'll be an optimizer level this week, and that drives a lot of stuff. So,
well, he disappointed a lot of us last week.
He did, but that's okay. We forgive him. We forgive our son.
94% snap rate, 19 carries, 3 targets, under 60 scrimmage yards, but 8 red zone rushes. It just could have been great. The matchup last week, I did a trend on it. I didn't think there was enough to move away from it. That kind of got the better of him. Still 94% snap rate at 50, 57, 56, something like that.
Yeah. Take that every time.
You got to take that. Yeah. And this week, the matchup is drastically easier. The Bengals are 29th in rushing success rate allowed to running backs.
The Bengals are the defense that ruined Devin's single digits nickname. So, I feel like you got to go to Zach Moss here. So, yeah, I agree. My first love at running back, I think I do like Bijan Robinson more, but I like the opposing side of that game in Rachaad White as well at $7,400. The Falcons' rush defense is pretty good, but we're going at White for the pass catching. He's at 14.7 carries and 4.3 targets per game this year. He has 98 plus yards from scrimmage in 6 of the past 7 games, including the first matchup against the Falcons. He had 65 yards on 6 targets in that game. Salary is 74. So I could see a not intentional, but accidental game stack here of Bijan with Rachaad White. Very okay with that. I think that both these guys are good. I prefer Bijan, but I think that Rachaad White is very much in that discussion as well. I've got Isaiah Pacheco as my second love too. As mentioned, I prefer him if McKinnon can't go, but I think part of the reason why he's viable regardless is because they've been running the ball more effectively recently. And I think they're going to keep on leaning on that a bit more. Again, assuming he's healthy. He has had some bad games, but since the snaps went up, he's also at 158 yards, 98 yards, 90 yards. So I want to monitor the injury report, both for him and McKinnon, but 7,000 for Pacheco is reasonable for him even if McKinnon does play. If McKinnon does play, maybe I go with Rachaad White and Bijan and Zach Moss above him, and he gets outside my top 3. But he'd still be a consideration for that top 3 regardless. Let's talk about Zach Moss, elite role in the games as lead back, 21.6 carries and 2.6 targets per game as a lead back. Even with last week included, he still had 114.8 yards from scrimmage per game in that sample as well, with a 60% red zone share. He's been Kyron Williams for $6,800 against the Bengals. Sure, sign me up. So I'm going to have him in every lineup again this week. Just going to do it. I don't care. So there you go.
One more name in this range. You'll probably just say no and want to move on, but Joe Mixon, 72.
Nope. Move on. Receiver. What you doing there? Absolutely not. I'd rather get hit by a bus. I'd rather get hit by 6 buses.
You might dislike Joe Mixon more than anyone else.
I don't dislike him. I dislike using him.
Okay.
Well, actually, there are reasons to dislike him too. I forgot about that, but yeah, sure.
So I had Chris Olave. I was thinking of going to Debo for my number 1. I love both of those guys, but I don't know how I walk away from this. Not putting Justin Jefferson here. You can build a lineup. We talked about really 3 names at running back that we really, really love. A couple more pivots that are in play, especially if you go down to like Javonte and put him in that tier. I don't know how you walk away from this and not talk about Justin Jefferson as a love. I mentioned almost 140 yards per game when he was healthy, 3 touchdowns in those. He didn't have a touchdown in his first 2 games, but had I closed the tab already, but 150, 149, 148 yards. It is crazy. You just got to play him at this salary. It's very reasonable, and you can play him with Lamar with all the value we have. So I'm playing Justin Jefferson. Just spoiler alert. I think I'll have Jefferson and Lamar in my head-to-head against you. I think that's sort of one of the best starts you can have for this week. Second love, Zay Flowers, another reason to like Lamar, but 6,500 in this matchup. I think it's a really, really easy case to be made for Zay. In the first game without Mark Andrews, he paced the team 8 targets, had a rushing score, which you love to see. 2 targets, at least 10 yards downfield. He's just he's been the team's top option in terms of wide receiver. That's not going anywhere. We usually want roles to expand when injuries happen, but I don't quite think that he needs that. So I think that with the Rams allowing some downfield passing as well, Zay just really stands out to me. And then my third love is Rashee Rice. Again, I mentioned this already, but over 30% in-game target shares over the past 2 games. I'm fully willing to buy in on role shifts, especially for young players as the season progresses. He's got yardage upside, 8 catches in each of those contests. I don't necessarily overall love the matchup against the Bills, but in this game, Rice is going to be involved, and for 6,300, he's very likely to be in my main lineup as well.
I agree with that, in large part because I want to stack that game. I also want to stack Rams-Ravens, which is why Puka Nacua is my first level wide receiver. Really good bring-back option for Lamar teams. He has a 28% target share if you look just since Cooper Kupp's return. He has 33% of the deep targets and 25% inside the red zone. They got him creative touches last week, had a really long rush, got called back because of a hole, but it was really fun to watch. He kept getting destroyed, but kept on coming back. I don't know how, but this dude is made out of titanium, apparently. And they're going to have to throw a lot in this game. So salary for Puka is reasonable at $7,600. So I want to be in Puka Nacua for sure this week. My second love is also Rashee Rice. The targets have gone up as Mahomes has gotten more comfortable with him. It's 24% since the bye, which is actually above Travis Kelce in that time. And that includes a game before they said, okay, we're going to get the ball to our good players. So trying to make his shares look worse, he still looks pretty good. He finally got his first 100-yard game 2 weeks ago. He's got the good red zone role that he's had all year. He's $6,300 for access to a great game, so I want to do that whenever I can. So Rashee Rice at $6,300, tremendous play this week. We haven't had a lot of low-salaried receivers to love so far this year, but we do get that this week, both with Jackson Smith and Jigba, but also with Odell Beckham III, or with Odell Beckham Jr. at $5,700. Beckham has been banged up all year. This will be just the 4th game where he has not been on the injury report the entire season. And again, he had 116 yards in one of those games, 7 targets in another. He's at 2.3 yards per route run this year with a 26% target share on the routes he's run as well. And the salary's low. So I can stack Lamar Jackson with a very good pass catcher who may get a better role this week than he's had in the past because he's healthier now. Maybe have Isaiah Likely in the mix too and have a lot of salary to burn for the other slots in my roster. I think that makes a lot of sense. So Beckham has not had a great year by any means. The yardage hasn't always been there, hasn't shown a lot of upside, but I think if the snaps go up, which they could this week, we could see Beckham have a really solid game for a low salary. So Odell Beckham, $5,700, a guy I will happily turn to you in week 14.
Love the target per route rate shout out there. He's just behind Justin Jefferson and Chris Olave in that department.
Oh, didn't know that.
I mean, there are guys above them, but like that's just context.
Oh, interesting. I'll take that for sure. Okay, tight end. What you going with there?
Travis Kelce. I'm already, as in building lineups, having a hard time getting there because I'm prioritizing like Justin Jefferson now. But I'm going to go out of my way, especially when I'm building Josh Allen lineups, to get Kelce in there because it's going to force me to be a little bit different, just in the fact of the way that I need to build the rest of the lineup with some really taking advantage of the value at running back and receiver, but very easy to justify. Leads all tight ends in yards per game with almost 75. I already mentioned this, but like Buffalo kind of limits downfield passing to tight ends. They're second in ADOT allowed, but they're 23rd in target per route rate allowed to tight ends. So that'll probably change in terms of defensive scheme, but I do like that metric because I think it kind of tells what teams allow and what teams sort of take against certain defenses. So Kelce at 8,000, the upside's there. He just rates out really well in terms of the floor ceiling projections that I run. Second love is more of a pivot. I like Isaiah Likely more because I'm just likely to stack his quarterback, but Kyle Pitts, I think, shouldn't get forgotten about. Salary's $5,300. He's had a really, really good role this season. No tight ends have more downfield targets than Pitts, who has 35. Kelce's at 33, and then next up is at 26. I can't remember who it is. But he's got minus 55.1 receiving yards over expectation on those downfield looks. And yes, that's partially because of the offense he plays in, but it also indicates room for growth. Tampa Bay's not good against tight ends. I think you could do way worse on a tight end slate where we have like three guys.
Yeah.
Pitts being the fourth makes a lot of sense to me. So if you want to get away from Isaiah Likely as like the obvious value tight end, look into Pitts a little bit more.
Yeah, and he's another route to game stack with Rashad White, so I think that's fine. I think the Pitts is fun. My first lever at tight end is also Travis Kelce. Salary for him is pretty reasonable at 8,000. He scored only once in the past 5 games. We know that Kelce has like multi-touchdown potential. He's had 91 and 81 yards the past 2 games, so he should be able to get, or we should be able to get here because we got a lot of mid-range running backs, low-salaried receivers we like. And again, it's great access to a game where I'll be using Mahomes, using Josh Allen. So I want to be on Travis Kelce for this week. My second love is Isaiah Likely. You alluded to only 40 yards in week 12 without Mark Andrews, but he was second on the team with 6 targets. He helps reduce the effective salary of Lamar Jackson. They have a high implied total. I'm going to be stacking here. And if you pair both Odell and Likely with Lamar, it just gives you a lot of salary flexibility. So I do like Isaiah Likely quite a bit this week. Defense, what you going with there?
The Browns.
Last week, the note for the Rams was Joe Flacco. This week, the note is CJ Beathard.
Yeah. And if not, like a very immobilized Trevor Lawrence.
With no left tackle and no Christian Kirk. Yeah.
Also, the Saints, they're like 42 or 43, maybe the Colts, but I think the Browns are the obvious play, and I don't want to get too cute.
I think the Bengals are in play at 37 because that game could feature a lot of plays. So that's good for defense. I don't hate the Raiders at 37 against the Vikings because Joshua Dobbs can have some turnover issues. So
you sure can.
I don't think that's the worst idea. So you can save at defense this week. The Chargers against Russ. I mean, I used the Texans last week against Russ, and that was fine. Not super enthused about touching that defense, but I wasn't super enthused about the Texans defense either. So, I think there are routes this week to spend down at defense for sure. My love is also the Browns at 38. I'm okay with them if Lawrence plays, just prefer it if it's Beathard instead. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we close up shop for week number 14?
I think we really covered this one. We finally got to Zach Moss at the 90-minute mark. Yeah, it's I still don't. I don't know if I feel any better about like the non-obvious games this week. I think what I really learned was that I want to play a lot of Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I think that is a fair takeaway to come away with. To me, it's stack those good games, get Jefferson as a one-off. You can do that this week, so please do so because it is wise, as always. That's all we got here for today. Back with you once again Monday to recap all the action and key takeaways. That'll be up on the FanDuel YouTube page live at 10 a.m. Eastern, and then up on FanDuel TV Plus and the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after that. So go subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. Brandon, people have questions for you on Twitter or Threads. Where can they find you there? Because you're on Threads now. Bullying works.
Yeah, that might be private still because people tried to hack my Instagram over Devontae Adams takes, but
I forgot about that. Yeah. Oh well.
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13. I'm on there all the time, always tweeting, always
Big
doing
tweet boy.
Yeah.
Tweet boy at Gdula13. I am on Twitter at Jim Saunas, on Threads at Jim.Saunas. You can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your lineups. We'll talk to you once again Monday and to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.